Hello and welcome back to the NRW Virtual Investor Conference. I'm Andrew Gagan from AusBiz. Great that you can join us. Our next company is Fertoz, manufactures and supplies organic input certified crop fertilizer products, including rock phosphate for agriculture, horticulture, and turf. The company holds interests in 2 rock phosphate mining projects, including the Wapiti and Fernie projects in British Columbia and Canada. It also develops and markets a range of organic fertilizer products in North America and Australia. And the company focuses on the carbon sequestration, consulting, trading, and implementation of carbon strategies using its organic fertilizers. A reminder, if you'd like to ask a question after the presentation, please do so by using the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. Let me now introduce the Executive Chairman, Pat Avery, and James Chisholm, the Executive Director of Fertoz. Pat.
Hey, thank you for the introduction. And we appreciate you all taking the time. Kind of got an interesting story, and we're very excited about where we're headed. And everybody's always eager to dive in the slides, and I'm glad to. But I'm going to give you just a moment of introduction, but it ties into my portion of the presentation and James's, and why we're fairly excited. Let me go back just for a moment and say, I've been with Fertoz about 5 years, but the founders, Stuart Richardson, James, a couple others, really saw this organic food demand growing about 6, 7 years ago. And really, to their credit, went to North America and really tied up almost all the high quality rock phosphate in North America. I won't say all, but really we've looked in almost every phosphate deposit above 15% P. Fertoz controls, which is a significant competitive advantage. Also started the Fertoz group, which imports from Vietnam and sells in Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia. But I want to be candid because, among the listeners, we may have some people that have been with us for a while, and we may have some that have, are relatively new with us. So I want to give a snapshot. Our first several years were very slow. We had to register all of our mines and stockpiles as certified organic. Canada has a standard, US has a standard, Australia has a standard, and then in North America, many individual states do. That took some time. And then I will tell you that, the farming and agriculture, penetration curve is slow. I joke with people, but no one bets the farm 1 year on a product. And so we find dealers and growers, particularly growers, start with 100 hectares, then 200 hectares. And so they have to see the performance and let it grow. We've also learned to blend our product, our rock phos, with a number of products that can enhance it. Sulfur, humates, biologicals. But let me start fast forwarding here because our pace is picking up. We recently got a number of large orders and have opened the Fernie mine this summer. We're actually mining today. We started. And so Fernie mine got Wapiti in reserve, and we're pulling from several stockpiles, Mexico and Montana. And we don't have to advance too far on the slides yet, and we also have great partnerships with dealers, wholesalers, and retailers. We have about 26 distributors. But because I'm experienced, you can tell by the gray hair, I'm going to give almost an introduction, for James later. The fertilizer market is changing. I mean, I made conventional fertilizer for almost 20 years, both phosphate, commercial synthetic phosphate, and potash. And let's be clear, it fed the world. World demand of commercial fertilizer is about 100 million tons, a little more than that. And it feeds the world. But for 40 or 50 years, there have been concerns about water runoff, eutrophication, salt buildup in the soils. There's some downsides, and you have to correct your farm or your acreages for those problems. And be candid, one of the recent ones over a couple of years is carbon. Again, I used to make commercial fertilizer, and as you acidulate rock phosphate, put sulfuric acid on rock phos, you release CO2. And as you make ammonia and urea, you make a lot of CO2. And frankly, most of that is released. And the numbers vary somewhat, but, and James will have them great graphics, but, you know, fertilizer across America or across the world is about 15% of greenhouse gases globally. And on farm usage, once you get all the products, it's about 30% of greenhouse gas emissions on the farm. So, you know, fast forwarding, you know, we think we have a unique proposition because, as James will build out, we're going to buy and sell and trade carbon credits, but we have products that start the process, low carbon or no carbon phosphate and nitrogen products. So bear with me, we're going to move ahead quickly now, but we're going to build all that out for you. And I hope you're as excited as I am. So yeah, the first slide was really just, you know, corporate picture. We've been growing. On this slide, I think it's only, you know, particularly striking that our board is very active. We speak almost daily, swap emails probably 10 times a day. But then when you look at our leadership, you know, this is significant years of experience. Almost all the guys have been in the field forever in grain or fertilizer. Team. Go ahead. You know, everyone talks about ESG focus, and we're going to build that out for you. But I think we are, again, fairly unique that when you look at, you know, concern of the planet, we have low carbon fertilizers that I think will displace a number of commercial synthetic products. We want you to share in this, and you know, we want this to be a profitable endeavor. But you should be proud, hopefully, that, you know, we're improving the globe while we're doing it. We look at our governance because we are on the land, both in mining, processing, and farming. And we do have a diverse group of leadership. Okay. So let's look just quickly where we are. We are the largest supplier of organic fertilizer in North America, and growing in. And now we're expanding in the carbon market. As I said, we've got a great product there that we bring in. We had a strong first quarter, and we have 10, 12, 15,000 tons of orders on the books for the second half of the year. This is all, of course, public information. To conserve capital over the last couple of years, we contracted with crushers, screeners, and granulators to watch capital. What you typically do in operations is once your volumes are large enough to justify your own equipment, you put that in. So the shareholders supported, and the board, we purchased a granulator. It was delivered to Butte, Montana about 2 weeks ago, and it's currently being put in place. We're actually building our expanded pressure screener system and putting the building in grain. As I mentioned, you know, the last bullet, we think there's going to be a rapid look at fertilizers versus low carbon fertilizers. As I said, about 30% of greenhouse gases on the farm are from fertilization. Okay. We've put this in a number of graphics before and in our presentations, and I think you see this though. Organics are growing in every marketplace. You know, certainly USA, North America probably leads the world in organic market, number of producers and volumes. Australia has very stable, as does New Zealand. We think this trend is going to continue. You know, candidly, you know, it's been a shame about traveling and restaurants and things like that, but candidly, at home. And they're looking more into what they're eating, where they get their food. Family or friend meals are a bigger deal now. Studies show. So we think these trends will continue.
Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
Righto. Thanks, Pat. Look, we'll go through these slides pretty quickly. I know we haven't got a lot of time, and some people may have seen it before, but we've actually got a bit more information now. This slide is all about carbon credits and the next global investment trend. As I said a couple of weeks ago in the AGM presentation, Trafigura came out a few weeks ago saying that their estimate is that the global market, global carbon market, will be 10 times the size of the oil market. They've since increased that to 30 times the size. You would have seen in the paper the other day, Mitsubishi's just bought into a carbon business in Australia. Mitsui's now in the game. As I said, Trafigura there, Vitol, Atocha are looking at it, Marubeni are into it. All these companies are getting into the carbon market because it is going to be huge. Just spend a few minutes on Google and you'll see how big it's likely to become. And it already is. So what we're talking about here in the next few slides is how we in Fertoz benefit from this. As Pat said, we're in a very unique position because we've spent a lot of time over the years getting products accredited and learning about blockchain, learning about carbon, learning about what happens in the agricultural space, not just with farmers, growing crops, but also in terms of reforestation, in terms of cattle and methane production, and also in terms of conventional fertilizers, and not only the amount of carbon dioxide that's produced in the manufacture of conventional fertilizers, but the amount of nitrous oxide that's released to the atmosphere when those conventional fertilizers are spread on farms. So we've got the benefit of years of that under our belts. And now we're using that and we're leveraging off that information and that learning to work our way into the carbon market. So you can read the rest of that at your leisure. The carbon market, there's voluntary and regulated carbon markets. There are different rules and regulations around the world. Everyone's running at a million miles an hour. But one of the advantages that we've come up with and we've found in this market is blockchain. By attaching the carbon credits to our blockchain, it's easy to get carbon credits verified right across the world. So next slide, thanks. So the huge potential, why is it so big? A few years ago, government started with this carbon market by encouraging companies to reduce the production of CO2 or their production of methane or nitrous oxide. And the reason they're the big gases, methane and nitrous oxide, is what one ton of methane that comes from cows, for example, or from a coal mine, that's equivalent to 25 tons of CO2. So when PricewaterhouseCoopers or KPMG come into a company in Europe and or in the States or in Canada or Australia, and they look at how much methane has been expelled to the atmosphere, PwC will count 1 ton of methane as 25 tons of CO2. But when they go to an agricultural establishment, for example, say a cattle farm, or a farm that's got conventional fertilizer, particularly urea, 1 ton of nitrous oxide released to the atmosphere is the same as 296 tons of CO2. So what happened? Governments decided to try the carrot approach and encourage companies to manage their CO2. That didn't work. So now they've got the stick approach, and that's working really, really well. Most governments around the world in developed countries have now introduced cap and collar systems for emissions trading. So the government sets a cap of the amount of CO2 each industry can produce. That cap is reduced every year, and there's a tax that's applicable if you're a company and you produce over that cap, if you produce more emissions than allowed by the government, and that tax increases every year. So we were talking to a group, and I mentioned this last time, we were talking to a group and still talking to them, just a steel mill in Europe. Before they actually produced their first ton of steel this year, they were already up for 150 million euros in carbon taxes. And that goes to 170, 175 next year, 195 the year after, and so on. So you can see the stick approach is working really well. So governments are legislating to reduce CO2 emissions. Can I have the next slide, thanks? So this is driving the demand for carbon credits. So carbon credits is produced every time somebody, a company, a farm, a forest owner takes away 1 ton of carbon out of the atmosphere. That produces 1 carbon credit, and that carbon credit can be sold, and it is typically purchased by companies that have got industrial processes that generate carbon dioxide or methane or nitrous oxide or some greenhouse gas. Those companies are subject to the cap and collar system, or cap and trade system rather. So they're looking for ways to reduce the amount of tax they pay. So they will buy that carbon credit from the person or the company that has reduced carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. You can see from this graph and another one coming up, the rise in the market. It's getting bigger and bigger. And those numbers there are actually only talking about a small part of the market. There's the latest estimates are that this market's going to be worth trillions of dollars going forward. So can I have the next slide, please? This graph here shows that in 2018, January 2018, if you'd actually invested in carbon futures in Europe, you would have made 3 times what you'd made on Bitcoin. So just to give you an idea of the size of the market and the potential in the market. Generating carbon credits, though, is not straightforward. It takes a bit of work to find out how to take carbon dioxide or methane or nitrous oxide from the atmosphere. As Pat said, because of our background in fertilizer, we know about urea and diammonium phosphate and monoammonium phosphate, the conventional fertilizers, and the amount of nitrous oxide that they can put into the atmosphere. So simply by blending our rock phosphate, which is doesn't create carbon dioxide when it's produced, because we don't have any manufacturing process with it. Simply by blending our rock phosphate with conventional fertilizers, farmers are able to reduce their CO2 emissions footprint. So, but other ways to produce carbon credits are in growing crops, sequestering the carbon in the crops and in the soil, growing forests and trees and grasslands, again sequestering the carbon dioxide in the plants and in the soil, reflooding old peat bogs, rehabilitating coastal wetlands. All of those suck CO2 out of the atmosphere, and anyone who can verify and show that they can verify and prove that they've sucked that CO2 out of the atmosphere, they can generate a carbon credit and then sell that carbon credit. So the next slide, please. So our competitive advantage in this market, years of lab tests and commercial agriculture tests and trials under our belt, years of research on blockchain. So we've been doing that. If you look at our press releases, we've been in the blockchain space for some time now, for a long time, working up a full blockchain. A lot of research into the carbon space and how to attach, how to generate and then attach those carbon credits to the blockchain, so that those carbon credits can be verified worldwide and then sold into the highest paying markets, because the markets around the world are dissimilar in terms of how much countries charge in their excess taxes and how much companies are prepared to pay for carbon credits. So luckily, we've already got long-term relationships with farmers, and we're leveraging off those right now. So next slide, thanks. So we provide exposure to the carbon market through, as I said, just our own phosphate and our own low carbon products, by being able to blend those carbon credit, those fertilizers with conventional fertilizers, but also importantly, reforesting and rehabilitating lands. We're in discussions with lots of groups about reforesting areas. There's 133 million acres that needs to be reforested in the US alone. So another quote went out today on a forest, an existing forest, and generating carbon credits by improved forest management by the owners of that forest. So how we're benefiting from this is we're going to people that own forests, grow plants, wheat crops, whatever, that have peat bogs, and saying we will accredit, we will verify, we'll measure and accredit and verify the carbon credits that are produced by your forest or plantation or farm, and we'll share in the credits. So we sign up a long-term contract with the owner of the forest or the farm or whatever, and do this every year and share in the credits, share in the value of those credits. It's important that those credits, those carbon credits, are verified and acceptable around the world by the PwCs of this world and the KPMGs and the BDOs and so on. So we've signed up partners that have got credentials that can verify, measure, manage, aggregate and verify the carbon credits. And then, as I said, by putting them into our blockchain, we can get them verified for worldwide acceptance. Okay, next slide, please. So this is what I've just talked about. These are the companies that we've partnered with. Trimble is a huge operation, multi-billion-dollar company. They've been in this game for a long time, doing aggregation, measurement, and Brightspot is our verification partner. Again, been in the business for some time. And then we've partnered with some other groups in terms of drone reseeding of forests and looking at unproductive areas on farmlands and so on that can be seeded and lead to additional carbon credits for farmers. Okay, back to you, Pat.
So we'll wrap up here. I think we've tried to paint a pretty good picture. Fertoz's core business is mining and producing rock phosphate fertilizer products, and we've laid that out over that. But by doing that and expanding on that, as we said, we have a very active, rapidly growing carbon division. But it is key that we work on our operations, execution, and quite candidly, cash flow and generate EBITDA, because all those tons generate potential carbon credits. So we'll get the granulator going this fall in Butte, Montana. As I said, we have phosphate products low in carbon, but we also have a nitrogen series of products made from alfalfa pellets that are carbon negative. They actually sequester carbon as it's used. And we've got a number of projects pending, as James said, in reforestation, abandoned mine lands, forestry. So I hope you'll join with us, look more into us, ask us questions. Again, our first role is obligation to the shareholder that we're profitable and grow for you. But I also hope, if you believe in this vision, that you'll take great pride that we're improving the environment and the globe while we're doing it. So I think Tim, James, and I'd be glad to take questions.
Pat and James, thanks very much for the presentation. Yeah, let's get to a couple of questions. The first one being, can you explain how the deals with Trimble and Brightspot work? Are you effectively outsourcing your execution as part of the carbon strategy to these groups?
Yes, look, we can go into it in a bit of detail. It's probably going to take some time, so I'll probably just give a high level on it. We're outsourcing just part of the work to Trimble and outsourcing part to Brightspot. We needed a group like Trimble that could use satellites and satellite imagery to measure carbon sequestration, and we needed a verified verifier, like an accredited verifier. There's only, I mean, there's a number of them around, but we're not accredited to verify carbon credits yet. So we set up the partnership with Trimble, and we set up the partnership with Brightspot, and they do a small portion of the work. We maintain all the customer facing, everything that's customer facing. So they're only subcontractors for us, but they're important subcontractors.
Let me just touch on that too, Andrew. I'm sorry. And I know we have questions pending, but yeah, I mean, I just want people to understand the process. Trimble has been around for many years, but they participated 7 years in the Alberta provincial government program. They have hundreds of agronomists that go out and check soil and soil carbon levels. And then they compare that to satellite and drone images so we can get those verified. And again, Brightspot has registered with all the governmental agencies as an approved verifier. So we're all working each other's best expertise.
Thanks, Pat. Okay, just a question in relation to carbon credits. Can you perhaps, as an example, elaborate how those credits are earned by the company on a 1,000 hectare pine plantation?
Yeah, that's so a couple of different ways. Let's assume that the trees haven't been planted. So if there's just vacant ground, we would go in with drones, seed that area, and then each year, particularly in North America, there's already quite an extensive database on sequestration by crop or sequestration by tree type, tree species, sequestration by shrubs, and sequestration by different grasses. So there's already quite a comprehensive database that we can access. And so as the trees grow, it's pretty easy to measure their growth from a satellite. And then it's also relatively straightforward to work out the sequestration of carbon in the soil and the sequestration of carbon in the plants. One difference, so each year it's easy enough to work out how many tons of CO2 are sequestered in that area. One thing that some governments have introduced is the ability to bring forward the sequestration on an accounting basis, so that it's not a straight line sequestration by the plantation, in the plantation. So to encourage people to plant more trees, and to encourage groups to look at tree planting and sequestration via natural forests and pine plantations and so on. Some governments are introducing or have introduced accelerated accounting of the carbon sequestration to allow companies to claim credits earlier and not necessarily on a straight line basis over 25 or 30 or 40 or 50 years.
Thanks, James. And how quickly can you start monetizing carbon credit sales?
We're doing, when we've mentioned this in our press releases, we're already well into verification of a trial series of carbon credits to be added to a blockchain to go to a steel mill in Europe. So that's in process right now. So that will generate not a lot of cash, but it just proves the whole, chain for us. We've got, until we get that done, we were sort of holding off in some quotes, although there's been such demand that we've actually been putting quotes out recently on some much bigger projects, because we're getting pretty close to the end of our trial, and so that's given us enough comfort, I think, to put some big quotes out now. And those credits, it depends on when those credits are sold. So the other thing that's happening in the market at the moment is, as you would have seen in those graphs, the prices are going up. So there are already groups looking at banking carbon credits and not selling them at the moment, but banking them for later use when prices are higher. And there's a good indication that prices are going higher, not just from the graphs, but from the amount of demand of emitters. And so we're just watching all that at the moment. We've got to manage, I think, in terms of going forward, we've got to manage how we make money from selling carbon credits, and also what our customers want to do in terms of banking some carbon credits to sell at a later stage. So we're just working through all that at the moment. So, but it is, we're certainly expecting to have some announcements out in the next, in the next little while in relation to the trial and the sale and monetization of carbon credits.
James and Pat, thanks very much for your presentation from Fertoz.
Thank you.
Thank you.